So let's start off with COVID-19. What do we know? And Colleen, if you're ready, I would love for you to take this part.
Are you going to go through the slides, Will, or put up the first slide? Okay.
Yes.
So you want to go ahead and do that? Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that you can hear on TV and in radio and that's confusing is talking about the virus as if it's a living thing. It's not. Viruses are not alive. They, as bacteria are. That bacteria can be treated by antibiotics. Viruses cannot be treated by antibiotics. The best way to think about a virus is as a strand of code, just like a computer code, inside like a balloon or some kind of sorry. Can go to the next slide.
Hey, sorry, I my internet shut down for a second, but I am back.
Okay.
So hopefully, can you guys see the screen again?
Yeah, there we go. Can you go to the next one? Because I did look at this to see what sort of came next.
Sure thing.
Yeah. So the issue is that coronaviruses, there's a lot of coronaviruses. Colds are actually a kind of coronavirus. And they're more, some, they affect animals, they affect people. Some are more dangerous than others. We know about MERS and SARS. The COVID-19 is a new virus, a novel virus that obviously just appeared in the last year. We don't know for sure where it came from. It looks like it is from an animal that may have used an intermediate animal, maybe in a bat that goes to that went to a human source. If you've watched the reports, who is investigating that right now. But what we know is it's an aerosolized virus. In other words, that people are getting it basically from being coughed on, from breathing, the droplets and that. There's very little evidence that it's actually being communicated by surfaces. We don't worry about that as much. Because it's aerosolized in that way, that issue of being close to each other, breathing each other's air, lack of ventilation are things that make the spread more dangerous. We do know that while in a lot of people it's asymptomatic, about 2% of the population it's more severe in. The other issue is how contagious it is. When a virus has what we call an R naught below 1, means it's like a 1-to-1 transfer. One person gives it to another person. COVID-19 is more contagious than that, so it has that potential to be exponential. There's different data on how contagious it is, and the different variants can affect that, but it spreads to more and more people. And of course, the issue with that too is that when you're spreading it to more people, even though you're spreading it among asymptomatic people per se, people who are healthier and younger, you go home to parents, grandparents, autoimmune brothers and sisters, other vulnerable people. And so that issue of that exponential spread and going throughout the community is also what makes it so very dangerous, and why, we want to consider the communities that we live in and how we affect each other. One of the things that I think is really interesting about this is, as you're watching this, is people keep going, they keep changing what they're saying about the virus. One day they're telling us not to wear masks, and 4 months later they're telling us to wear masks. And when you look at the history of molecular biology and that, what we have done in a year is profound and really super interesting. We have been able to sequence the whole genome of this virus in well under a year, which has made it possible to create vaccines. And the ability for us to, and the thing is that given how new the virus is, to have created the antimicrobials to create a vaccine literally in less than a year. These are things that took decades before. So it may be hard to see the information changing, but it's for any of us who have any watch biology, watch how biology changes, and that this has been profound in terms of how quickly information has gotten out, good information and adjustments in terms of treating this is something that's never really been seen before. Provost Nairn is an immunologist. You might want to ask if he has anything that he would like to add here.
No, nothing at this point. Thanks, Kobe. Appreciate it.
Okay, so these are the groups. We look at vulnerability. We know that the groups that are the most vulnerable are over 65. Some say 70, sometimes 80, depends on what you want to look at in terms of are you just looking at mortality rates, how severe the disease is and that, but we can say basically over 65, it's more dangerous. Comorbid conditions, heart and lung conditions, they're people with tend to have more severe condition or complications than that with obesity. So that's one that they watch. That's been one of the comorbid conditions that allows you to get higher priority, though priority doesn't matter anymore because now if you're an adult, you can get in. Healthcare workers probably has a lot to do with the viral load, meaning if you're working on the front line and you're exposed to people with COVID, you are exposed to more of those droplets. You're exposed to more of the virus. That's the viral load. So they're in more danger of getting more severe complications. The last one is really the most important, the BIPOC communities. People in these underserved communities often suffer more severe conditions. This has nothing that we know of to do with racial and ethnic differences. This has to do with social economic issues. People who have, less sanitary conditions, less access to good food, living in more crowded conditions. So anything that has to do with, we're talking about the issue of you are more likely perhaps to get more severe complications because of the conditions that you are living in, lifestyles and that, not because of your race or your ethnicity.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Colleen. That was a great discussion. If anyone has any questions before we move forward, feel free to jump in and chat. But I think otherwise we can shift gears here into mutations. So I believe we asked Dr. Clinton Hartz to take this part. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can do that. That's fine.
All right, great. Thank you.
So, as we all know, you see it in the news all the time about how some people some states are relaxing some of their restrictions, but we always have that sense of potential of the next big spike. And that tends to come out because of these new variants. So the big one that we're starting to see, which could become the actual dominant strain here in the US in the next several months, is the UK strain, which is the B117. The reason why these variants are so concerning is they can spread more quickly and faster to other people. So this one was just detected in December of 2020. The UK variant as well, we don't really know if it actually leads to more deaths or more serious disease, but it can spread quickly and go on to those that are more easily affected and higher risk. So the other ones are another South African strain, the B1351. That was also detected originally here in October of 2020. The emerging pattern, the concerning one for me and what I've been reading some of the literature is the one in Brazil, the P1, that is also developed here in the US. The reason why that one is concerning, it's actually been shown to affect the ability of your body to recognize, or antibodies to recognize if you've been infected with it before. It can actually decrease your ability to recognize that new strain with that. So the reason why these gets to be so concerning is basically that they become less effective even if you were infected with COVID prior and you end up getting a different strain. Your body may not be as effectively able to neutralize that virus, and you can potentially spread it on to others despite having a prior COVID infection. So that's kind of why these variants, they get to spread more quickly. Their antibodies may not be as effective. So the only way to really stop mutations, so every time somebody gets infected with the virus, you have the ability, that virus has the ability to mutate. And that can develop these new strains. So that's kind of why the best way that we can do and stop these mutations is to stop the spread of the virus. The only way to really stop the spread of the virus, or to continue our social distancing, continue good hand hygiene, wearing our masks when we're out, and then get vaccinated. That's the number one thing that we can do to stop the spread of these new variants. Everybody wants to get back to normal and get back to pre-COVID conditions if there is going to be a pre-COVID. But the best way to do that is through these mitigation factors. So that's why the B117 right now, I think I just read a study just literally before we got on here that it's currently already 26% of the infections of COVID right now are that new strain. So it's a concerning trend that we're starting to run into, especially with a lot of states starting to decrease some of their restrictions, that these new variants tend to becoming increasingly more popular and more infectious. So then just talking about vaccines, kind of how they work. The first two vaccines that came out were the Pfizer and the Mrna vaccine. These are amazing vaccines. Yes, they're novel vaccines. People get concerned about, well, this is a new technology. It's not new technology. This technology, these mRNA vaccines, have been around for over 10 years. They've been tested. They've been used actually in immunotherapy for cancer patients. It's well studied. The vaccine trials that were put through every vaccine number. There was over 40,000 patients in each vaccine trial. And thank you for those that have participated. That's an amazing trend. The reason why that we were able to push these vaccines out so quickly is because instead of doing the trial in sequence, they do them in series. So they run them together. So basically, once they developed this vaccine, they were able to start mass producing it before the trials even started. And they were willing to take the loss if that vaccine didn't work. So the mRNA vaccines, they work. They're not giving you the DNA of the virus. They're basically, they've traced the the spike protein that allows it to enter your cells. And they put that on the outside of this fatty protein nanoparticle that allows it to be stabilize the structure, so that when it's injected, your muscle cells recognize that spike protein, and then they're able to make that immunity and that antibody to it. And then eventually those antibodies will neutralize the virus if you ever become infected. There are other vaccines that have now been approved, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. There's also the AstraZeneca one that's being used in the European Union, and then the Oxford vaccine that'll be coming out. So these vaccines are more what we call vector vaccines. So they're actually kind of like other kind of common viruses that you'll see. Basically, you'll take an attenuated virus or a virus that is weakened or killed, and they'll use a different type of a common cold virus and attach that spike protein to that common cold virus that has not been able to infect you. And they'll attach that as their way to get it into your immune system. And then you'll develop the same thing type of scenario, will develop an antibody to that spike protein. And that will help you prevent development of COVID. The amazing thing about all these vaccines is their efficacy rate is amazing. So the emergency use authorization had a 50% cutoff. So they wanted you to say if they got it above 50%, that this vaccine is going to be very good and it'll help us get out of this pandemic. All these vaccines have actually gone above and beyond that. And unfortunately, you can't compare the mRNA vaccines to the Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca vaccines because they came out in different times. So trying to figure out what vaccine you say, oh, I want a different vaccine because this one has a higher efficacy rate or whatnot, we can discuss that too. So the efficacy of each, I think I'll be on the next slide there, Will, if you don't mind. So kind of like what is best is, so the Mrna and the Pfizer vaccine has between a 94 to 95% efficacy rate. That's great. That's unheard of with vaccines. Now, The downside of those vaccines is that those viruses or those vaccines were studied earlier in the pandemic, earlier in this virus. So before a lot of these variants came about and before the kind of highest portion. So it's hard to kind of compare these mRNAs versus the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which tends to be about 74 to 75% effective here in the US. So you can't, it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. So you can't really say one vaccine is better than the other. They're all amazing vaccines. And the best thing about all these vaccines, and the one thing that we're trying to prevent, is the severe disease. So they're all 100% effective in preventing severe disease, and that is hospitalizations and death. So even though some may be less effective or not, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was actually also tested against some of these variants where the mRNA vaccines were not tested against these new variants. So to still be able to have 74% of efficacy is outstanding. So I'll tell you, no matter what vaccine that you have, get the first one that's available to you, and that is the best vaccine for you. So you can't really compare these vaccines.
So if you were given the opportunity to choose among, the field of all these vaccines and choose whichever one you'd like, are you saying you don't really have a strong preference? Do you think you would have a clear favorite in your mind?
No, I don't have a favorite. I would get whatever vaccine was available to me. I personally I got the Pfizer vaccine because that came through my employer. So that is what I have experience with. And I had literally just mild arm soreness and no other side effects. So, but I would tell my family members, I would tell anybody that to get the first vaccine that's available, whether it's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, whether it's Moderna, or there's be a couple other vaccines coming out in the summer. So I would just recommend getting the first vaccine available, because the main thing you want to do is prevent severe disease, and all of these vaccines do an amazing job at preventing severe disease.
Great, thank you. Oh yeah, so this is a meme that my committee chair sent me, so I hope you guys enjoy that. There's been a lot of Mark Zuckerberg talk around this vaccine. But if anybody's heard any crazy rumors about this vaccine or these vaccines, or just like buzz, going around on Facebook or anything like that, please feel free to share, just to, add some humor to it. There are some wild ones. Not getting much so far. One that I've heard is, I'm sure some of you guys have heard about this. There's like a lot of talk that it's correlated to like 5G. People get vaccines and suddenly they get like 5G coverage. Is that the first you guys are hearing about that one? There's a lot of stuff. Okay, Annie's heard it. Right on. Okay, we are going to play a video that dispels some of the common rumors. Yes, infertility. Yeah, I've heard that one as well. I think I need to stop
This
sharing.
is the checkers game where
restart with audio here.
Grandson and granddad will
How's that sound? Is that volume all right?
This is the kitchen where the new boyfriend will
Just like COVID-19, the vaccine being administered right now is brand new. So, of course, people have questions. But there is some misinformation out there that medical experts want to clear up.
I try to, dispel these myths that you're bringing up.
For this story, I talked to Jennifer Dumas, a doctor of osteopathy at AFC Urgent Care in Santee. We also turned to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The first question: does the COVID-19 vaccine inject the live virus into your body? The answer is no.
That is not live virus. There are very few live virus vaccines, and not this one.
Dr. Dumas says the vaccines are made with mRNA technology, which teaches your immune system how to recognize and fight the virus that causes COVID-19. So if you're feeling achy a week after getting the vaccine, that means it's working.
It's just activating your immune system, and it's only for a day or two.
Can the vaccine alter your DNA? No. Again, both the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are classified as mRNA, which do not interact with your DNA.
Vaccine only enters the cell. It doesn't get into the nucleus, which is where the DNA is. So it can't affect the DNA.
Is it true you're not fully vaccinated until weeks after you receive a second dose? Yes, according to Dr. Dumas, this is the case with other vaccines as well.
Just like the flu shot, you expect it to take about 2 weeks to get to its full effect.
If I've already had COVID, should I get the vaccine? Yes.
And the reason for that is because we don't know how long that immunity is going to last, the natural immunity.
What about fertility? Will the vaccine impact my ability to have children? No. Researchers with the CDC say there is no evidence suggesting that fertility problems are a side effect of any vaccine. People who are trying to become pregnant now or who plan to try in the future may receive a COVID-19 vaccine when it becomes available to them.
A couple more things. The vaccines came out quickly. Are they safe? Yes, FDA and CDC officials say they have both gone through rigorous studies and clinical trials. Finally, once I get the vaccine, do I still need to wear a mask, practice social distancing, and wash my hands? Yes. The vaccines are not 100% effective, and experts say you should be doing all those things at least until we get herd immunity.
All right, so hopefully that clears up some of the rumors we've been hearing. I think the most common one that I've heard is that it was too rushed to be safe, that these trials were too quick and not, thorough enough, and that is very much not the case. As Clinton mentioned, these trials had 30 to 40,000 people. You said, correct? And they've tested extensively, and they have completed the same process that every vaccine goes through to ensure safety. And just because the timeline was a bit quicker doesn't mean that they were skipping any steps or doing anything to cut corners or to be negligent when it comes to safety. Oh, I just saw Jose's comment. I've heard people ranting on social media how the vaccines insert chips into everybody and how it will cause a mass extinction in humans. Man, the chips one is funny to me because, like, if somebody wanted to track all of humanity, we've all got phones. I mean, at least in like the US and like the more developed countries of the world, like they don't really need to track us at all. It's very easy to already. But yeah, the mass extinction thing, I don't think I've heard that one, but I'm sure there's plenty of that going around. A social security number, exactly. Yeah, like we've already kind of, we don't need to inject something into us to give people data. They can gather data on us pretty much already if they wanted to. They can just buy it from our internet cookies. So don't worry about that. Not that you would regardless, but yeah, mostly humorous, the stuff like that. You hear things like that and you kind of have to laugh at it, the fact that people do believe this. You just, find the humor in it. But we will shift along here. So side effects. Clinton, is it okay if you take this part as well?
Yeah, I can do that. So the most common side effects are definitely going to be pain at the injection site. I'm sure many of you had something like a tetanus shot that gives you that arm soreness and just kind of feels a little bit of irritation to that area, and that's from the injection. You can get some redness, and some people, especially with the Mrna vaccine, can kind of get some swelling down the arm called the kind of enlarged lymph nodes in that arm that was injected. And the other thing, the most common things too, is you can get almost feel like you actually have the viral infection, where you get tired, the fatigue, the headaches, the chills and nausea. So the main thing you do is definitely drink plenty of water. You can use warm compresses to the area if it gets swollen. The first vaccine, if you get the mRNA vaccine, which you need 2 doses to be fully immune, the first vaccine is usually not as bad. The second dose tends to be where you get a little bit more side effects because of your first time you are sensitized, and then you develop a boost to that immune response on that second dose. Majority of the time, the symptoms last 24 to 48 hours or less. Some people can have, if you've had COVID prior, a lot of things that I've been seeing in those that have with infections is that basically makes you feel like you've had the symptoms of COVID that you had prior. So if you had a more severe COVID case, a lot of that vaccine can make those symptoms tend to reappear. So you still do the same things: hydration, Tylenol, rest. But majority of these, you do very, very well without any severe adverse reactions, and it's very well tolerated.
Sorry, I was still muted. But thank you for that. So in this section, we're going to walk through of our guest speakers, a lot of them. I'm not sure if all of us have been vaccinated. I mean, I haven't, at least, but in terms of guest speakers. So if we can go through and just kind of speak to our experience, anything relevant to share. What was it like to get the vaccine? What was the process like? How were your side effects? And if it's okay, Carrie, I'd like for you to start. Does that work for you?
I can start, but I haven't been vaccinated yet.
Oh, I'm so
So
sorry. Okay. Sorry about that.
I've interviewed a lot of people who have, but yeah, I have not. And part of that is actually a challenge of timing. I'm pregnant right now, so I have some other vaccines and I need to get that 2-week period. But I also have a husband who is trying desperately to get vaccinated and has not been able to in Colorado. So I can talk a little bit to the experience of being online constantly and not getting a vaccine. But yeah, I don't have my own vaccination story yet.
Okay, my mistake there. Congratulations on the pregnancy, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I guess we can then start with Sheriff Elias. Does that work for you?
Sure. Will, I was first vaccinated on December 28th with the Mrna vaccine, and 3 weeks later had my second dose. For the first round, I had no side effects other than a sore arm and nothing else. There was absolutely nothing else that I felt. For the second vaccine, I got that on a Monday. And on Tuesday afternoon, when I got home from work, I began to have some chills. So I took off my uniform and just felt really achy all over and tried to put on some warmer pajamas. And my wife told me that something must be wrong because the house wasn't cold. So obviously there were some side effects that I was feeling. Later on that night, I woke up in the middle of the night and had a fever of about 100 degrees and felt sort of dizzy, very tired. And a couple hours later at 5 a.m., my alarm went off for work and I woke up and felt perfectly fine and went and checked my temperature and it had went back down to 98.6. So I had some side effects for about 10 hours. After that, nothing else. I actually went to work that day and felt great and haven't had any side effects since. So I absolutely would do it again. That 10 hours that I had those side effects definitely was worth being vaccinated. In our field, we were in the 1B group for public safety. So sheriff's department, police department, fire department for Denver have had literally hundreds of people who have been vaccinated thus far. And I can attest in all of the conversations that I've had with safety personnel that the side effects for the first dose as well as the second dose have generally been very minimal. I do know one person out of all of those people who did have a rash that lasted for a few days, and through some medical care, they were able to take care of that. But other than that, there have been no lasting side effects from any of the public safety personnel or anyone else that's been vaccinated here that I know.
Great, thank you. I've heard of a rash being common as well. My roommate Chris had a rash for just a few days, but yeah, thank you for emphasizing the point that there's been nothing long term for not just you, but anybody in your department and relative field.
Absolutely.
We also have Michael to share. He was a member of the Vaccine Equity Task Force in Colorado, and as he mentioned, one of the first people to be vaccinated in the state. Michael, would you take it away?
Yes. I'm a 66-year-old African American, and I was trying to figure out what I could do to really help this COVID testing process. So back in August, I volunteered to be involved with the Mrna phase 3 testing. And I received my first vaccine on August 20th. And at that time, this was a double-blind test, so no one knew what they got. I later found out in January when they unblinded it that I did actually get the vaccine. But to go back to the August, when I first got the vaccine, I felt it was going to be just like any normal vaccine I've received in the last couple of years. You know, I've received pneumonia, I've received shingles, never had any reaction. Well, within about 4 hours after receiving my vaccine, I had about 7 of the 17 symptoms that the test center listed. And that was on my first vaccine. I had the body aches, the muscle aches, the nausea, the fatigue, and I was a little shocked. It only lasted about 12 hours and then it just disappeared. When I received my second vaccine on September 17th, I had the same symptoms, and they were actually a lot more severe and lasted about 24 hours. And you have to keep in mind that everybody reacts differently. I think CDC even says, you know, around 25% of the people who get the vaccine exhibit, you know, symptoms, severe symptoms or any kind of symptoms. So no one should be afraid to get the vaccine because of the symptoms, because the symptoms do go away within a few hours. And it's a lot better to have the symptoms than actually have the virus, which can linger for weeks, months. And we're finding out that you also have long haulers who have the symptoms, various symptoms from months and months. And as part of the phase 3 testing, we still are being observed. We have about a 3-month lead on the general population. So things are still coming up that have not necessarily been published. One of the things we got a memo on recently was that several members of the phase 3 testing group were having facial swelling. And what they found out is that if you have dermal fillers like Botox and various things of that nature, and you get the vaccine, it could cause you to have facial swelling. That hasn't really been published much, but they are looking at that among some of the phase 3 volunteers. But I'm certainly glad I took part in that because I think it's so important that people step up and help this process move along. And other than that, I felt great ever since my initial symptoms, and I'm going into 7 months. About 2 weeks ago, they just took a lot of blood out of me for a 7-month evaluation, and I'm scheduled to be program for 25 months. And as you hear on the news, they really don't know how long the vaccine is going to be effective. But as they continue to evaluate the phase 3 people and look at some of the phase 2 and maybe some of the phase 1 people, they're getting a better idea that the vaccine is still very robust after 7 months. So I certainly highly encourage everyone to get the vaccine. And it's a personal decision, but it's so much better than being on a ventilator or suffering the long-term effects that COVID can cause. So that's kind of my position.
Great, thank you so much. We have a question here that popped up from Chris to Dr. Harris. So the question is, why is it that your body has symptoms after you get the shot? Does that mean that you're getting the virus? Can you explain a little bit about the science behind why we get these side effects?
Yeah, so it's not that you're getting the virus. Basically, with like any infection, most of the symptoms that you develop, fever, muscle aches, joint pains, those are your actual response to your body's immune system developing those antibodies to the actual infection that you have. So you're not those aches and pains and feeling feverish, you're building up, that's your body's, when you get an immune response, you can get a fever, those kind of things, because it increases your internal temperature, and then the joint aches and the muscle aches. So you're not getting the virus from the vaccine. It's just when you get these symptoms, it's because you're developing that immune response. Just like if you have a flu infection, it's not necessarily the flu that's giving you the muscle aches and the fevers. That's actually your body's trying to fight that develop that immunity to fight that virus. So the same thing happens with this antibody infection, or excuse me, with this vaccine developing these antibodies for the COVID infection. So you're not actually truly getting the virus itself.
I wanted to say, I'm one of those odd ones out. I got the second Pfizer this week. The reaction I had was to the first. And it wasn't very long at all. It was like 4 or 5 hours after I had it, I just got chills and I got really tired for about 4 or 5 hours, and that was it. But what I want to mention, which we hadn't brought up yet, is the hardest part seems to be getting the appointment. I was really impressed by going in. I went to UC Denver, to Anschutz. The hardest part there was finding parking. But the issue was, it was really streamlined. It was great the way they did it. They, wasn't there very long. The line was fairly long at the time. It was after lunch, and we're in and out very quickly. People were wonderful. The one thing I would encourage people to do, particularly if you're not somebody who gets a lot of shots in that, is if you can relax your arm, take a deep breath, relax, that will help with the soreness in that as well. So, because there is a lot of anxiety that goes around that, and has help you. But the people were great in the process. I was real impressed by.
Yeah, that's a really great point. There's a lot of variability with getting appointments, and a lot of the difficulty around it, a lot of confusion of how to set one up. And I think a lot of people are avoiding it for that exact reason. So thank you for touching on that. Before we shift along, I want to encourage our audience to, contribute either by unmuting or by throwing in chat. For those of you who have gotten the vaccine, anything significant that you'd like to share, whether that be side effects or that process, what that was like for you, just to get an idea of our audience's experiences with it as well. And also among our guest speakers, if anybody else would like to share their experience getting vaccinated, you're absolutely welcome to do so.
I'll just quickly say before I have to leave for another meeting, Rodner, and I did get the Pfizer vaccine, 2 shots, no side effects other than some muscle soreness around the injection site. But one of the things that is more common is for younger people to get more side effects. They can make a bigger immune response than older people. So you may see some differences there, but I certainly didn't have any reaction. I'd echo what Colleen said. The folks at UCH have got it streamlined really well. And makes a difference when you're in and don't have to wait. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for making the time today. I know you have another meeting, so I appreciate you squeezing it in today. So I have a question as a follow-up to that, if anybody is able to answer. He said that younger people tend to have a larger immune response to the vaccine than older people, correct? Or did I have that backwards?
No, that's correct.
Okay. Can someone explain why that is? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, I can, however I want to take it, but it's just as we age, our immunity tends to diminish. So that's why you'll have, as a younger person, have more of a robust potential side effect, because your immune response is just better. So that's kind of why younger people tend to be healthier. Same thing with, and they have that just a robust immune system at the time. But as we age, unfortunately, just like everything else, kind of diminishes, your immune response tends to decrease as well.
Does that suggest that if you have more severe side effects to the vaccine, that it's your body is, using it more effectively, or your body is having a stronger antibody production response?
I don't believe that anybody's ever really looked at to see that if you've had higher side effects, that you can say that, oh, your immune response is better than somebody else's immune response, because everybody's a little bit different in how you develop your immunity. The main thing, to be honest, when I got my vaccine, I got Pfizer. So when I got it the first time, I just had a little bit of sore arms, and I was actually hoping for side effects, because that makes me feel like I was getting the immunity that I wanted and developing those immunities. So, and then kind of getting the second dose where I got a little bit of a headache and some mild joint ache. So it's kind of one of those things where it's not, you can't really take and say just because if you've had a great immune response. Some people, you'll still get the same immune response. Even if you get a sore arm, you're going to get the immunity. So it's hard to say. It's just that how your immune response, how your immunity responds. So just because you didn't get a lot of joint aches or muscle aches or a fever, doesn't mean you're not developing that immunity.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much. So next up, we're going to talk about vaccine rollout. So the process of getting registered, how and when you can get vaccinated. We mentioned a little bit about this, in terms of the governor's announcement recently, but we're going to get a little bit more specific here. And Chris, if you wouldn't mind taking lead on this part, I would appreciate it a lot.
Sure. I think you said it as we began today, that starting tomorrow, the limits basically on who can get vaccinated go away. And so what that means is that anyone older than 16, I think currently is the restriction, although there's studies that are talking about dropping that age too, but currently anybody over the age of 16 can register and get the vaccine. So I think up until now, it's been a little bit different. And I think we've all struggled a bit with different things. It sounds, Carrie, like your husband's still trying to get in there. And I will tell you what it is that we on the campus, as far as the campus goes, what we continue to tell folks is get it wherever you can get it, as soon as you can get it, in whichever vaccine you can get, because that's going to be, thank you, Dr. Hart, 16 for Pfizer, 18 for Mrna, and Johnson & Johnson still on the work. Yeah. Because the reality is, as I think Dr. Hart said, and others as well, Mr. Rouse, the place where the vaccines are most effective is it causing serious illness and death. And that's huge, frankly. Somebody said it to me once and they said, well, would you exchange a headache? Would you just get a headache instead of dying? I said, hell yeah, right? And so to me, that made some sense. It doesn't mean that there aren't other thoughts out there, but that makes sense to me in some ways for my experience. As far as campus goes, we have a shot clinic that's set up. Dr. Hart's is part of that. It's in the 5th Street Garage. If you haven't been to campus in a long time, it's in the 5th Street Garage. We have gotten about 1,200 vaccines, 1,300 vaccines this week. We switched over a little bit to Pfizer, but we're also getting Mrna. And early on, we had some Johnson & Johnson, although I don't know that that's Johnson & Johnson's likely to come back onto campus very soon, because there isn't as much of that out there. So we expect, and we are working to continue to obtain a steady stream of Mrna and Pfizer. Up until tomorrow, we would be in phase 1B4, which is the last, as it appears to be, the last priority before it becomes publicly or broadly available. As far as the campus invitation system goes, anybody who is an employee at the university, so temporary employees and student employees, were tossed into a big bucket that ended up over 10,000 people into that bucket. And we have been, in the Auraria Health Center has been pulling names, the Health Center Auraria has been pulling names out of that bucket to invite people to get the vaccine on campus. Although, like I said, we only have about 1,400 vaccines, although I think today we ended up with 377 additional vaccines as a result of some other things. So there was even some expectation that even over the next day or two, there might be additional invites that go out, which is always great news. But what does that mean that an invite goes out? What that means is we are desperately asking everybody, our students, staff, and faculty, to check their university emails, okay? I know that many of us don't want to check our university emails, or we set up university-wide emails that go straight to our spam filters or trash accounts. This is one of those times that we are going to plead with you, and we're going to be sending out some materials to our faculty soon to ask them to plead with their students and you as well, to say, please look in your emails. And what I'd say first is please sign up anywhere, everywhere you can, because you're eligible right now to sign up, whether that be with Centura, who's running the Ball Arena and Dick's Sporting Goods, or HCA or Kaiser or UC Health. I happen to be lucky. I signed up on about 15 lists and I got an invite. I think the first one that came through was from Centura. And I was like, great, I'll just go do that. And we're going to encourage you to do that. But at the same time, we are going to be having on-campus events. And there are times, like today is one of them, where we may be able to get additional vaccine, and we're looking for people to come. And we're looking for people to come as soon as they can. I think our hope is over the next probably couple of weeks, we'll transition from just having employees and make it broadly available for all students. That could happen sooner rather than later. It just is a matter of time and seeing how people, how many people respond to the requests and how much vaccine we get. Because unfortunately, the state continues to the vaccine numbers kind of go up and down. So it's always a little bit tricky at times. But we anticipate getting a steady stream, at least in the future. And so we are going to continue to have that clinic on site. Our goal is to make it run 5 days a week from 8 to 4 every day and get up to 1,000 people vaccinated a day if we have the capacity to do that, if we can actually get the vaccine. And so our plan at the university is to encourage as many folks who are comfortable getting it and make the decision that they can get it in the timing to do so this spring. So that's where we're headed at the moment. And thank you, Will, for putting in that. support@primarybio.com is the email address that comes in. Exactly right. That's the one that hits your inbox. That's the one we want to make sure you're not blocking. We've set up our system across the university, so our university systems don't block that. We've whitelisted it, so to say, and made it clear that that can go through and make sure that that happens for as many folks as possible. So that's kind of the campus update, at least at the moment. I don't know, Dr. Hartz, if you have any thoughts on Johnson & Johnson, but we got a very small amount at the very beginning, and I don't think the clinic has been able to obtain any since then.
Yeah, that's correct. Right now, the CDPHE is holding those mostly for their mass vaccination events in the community. And so we're getting mostly Pfizer and Mrna at this time.
And just, I will tell you this, there is a bit of a, I don't know, card shuffling game where if we're a receiver institution, which means we're trying to get the word out there. If you have extra vaccines, we'll find arms to put it in, right? And so that's our plan in the future, just so you know, for our students and staff and faculty. Our goal is to get as many vaccines as we can because we have the capacity to put them in people's arms. So even this morning, I was trying to negotiate 1,000 or 2 extra vaccines for us in the next week or so, in an attempt to try and say, yeah, we'll just take them, we'll figure it out, right? That's going to be our goal. One of the things we can do, and we're actually going to do in 2 weeks, we've signed up and been approved for an equity clinic through the governor's office, because the governor sets up equity clinics that are designed to be targeted at certain groups, underrepresented groups that perhaps haven't received enough of the vaccine comparatively. And we are seeing that across the state. I think Colorado is starting to shorten up that gap. But there are absolutely definitely communities in Colorado that are not getting vaccinated at the same rates. And so part of the goal with our equity clinic is which is on the 17th and 18th, is to make it frankly open to external community and some very specific communities that surround our campus in an attempt to try and identify and get Latino community in particular that surrounds our campus largely to get vaccinated and encourage them to do that. So part of what we're doing is partnering with some community organizations and some city officials to try and identify how can we encourage those communities in particular to come use the facility, which is the Fifth Street Garage, but to come to campus and to get vaccinated because we want to make sure we're doing our part as a campus. And that's a tri-institutional activity. So that's one of the things we're working on right now. We're hopeful, frankly, if it goes really well, that we're going to be able to continue that and be able to continue offering that to our community and others out there that need vaccine and feel like they're not getting it, so that we can help provide that space. Because we, like I said, are a receiving organization. We're happy to accept your vaccine and put it in people's arms.
Chris, there was a question that came up from somebody that in our department. Do we have walk up and drive up available, or do you know when walk up is available? Because of course that affects students.
Yes, it does. We have walk up and drive up available. So if you make it, if currently, and this is currently, and I think the question will be what the future holds, I don't know, but currently it is invitation. And so, or you'll get an appointment, I should say. It's an appointment-based system. So you show up at the time of your appointment, you can drive up, you can walk up, and you'll be taken care of. Now, up until now, the weather hasn't been the best, so it's a little bit cold outside, but now that it's gotten, it's going to be warmer, we should be able to, it should work just perfectly. But yes, we can absolutely deal with whatever folks need to do coming to the event or coming to our clinics. One thing I will say, there has been some question about, does it cost anything? No, absolutely not. The administration doesn't cost anything. The vaccine costs you nothing. You will not be expected to provide money at all. You will also not be asked for your immigration status in the United States. We cannot ask you that question. If somebody does, that's a problem, but we will not be asking that. So that means we need to make sure others in our community can get vaccinated. Sometimes we get questions about what information is gathered. Well, this is a little interesting, and Dr. Hartz can tell us how this works, but there is some information that's gathered so that it goes into a statewide database. But that statewide database just speaking from experience, is incredibly locked up, meaning it can't be used for any purposes other than these public health ones, to make sure that people are getting vaccinated. So sometimes people ask those questions. I don't know if Colleen or Carrie or Dr. Hartz, you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, so with us, we will gather just for the CIS, that's the Colorado Immunization Information System, just to kind of document so that we mostly for side effects and if there's an issue with a lot or something, a lot number or something like that, and the medication that we're able to contact you. So you'll get that name, phone number, address. They will also, if you get done here, will also ask for your health insurance information. But if you don't have it, that's not a huge deal. And that would be the main information that we gather.
So on the issue of no cost, I want to just clarify a little bit. We have some people tuning in who live all across the US, people who are doing school online. Is that the case in every state, at every department that you would go to, that the vaccine is free?
Yes, I think we're all nodding yes.
Yep.
Awesome, cool. Just want to make sure, because I know that's a question for some people.
Absolutely. No, I think that's, we saw some data recently that suggested, excuse my phone here, that suggested that was a big concern, and absolutely not. We want people to get vaccinated as soon as they can, whenever they can, regardless of cost. There's not going to be anything.
Sweet. That's awesome. That's very great. Well, what we have left is a space for Q&A. And we also have a Kahoot to test our knowledge at the end here. So don't leave too quickly if you're antsy. But we have some space here. If anybody has questions regarding anything we've talked about today or anything regarding the vaccine as a whole, any questions that have been coming up or any issues, please feel free to ask. We have that chat, and I will paste one more time that the anonymous link if you'd prefer to ask that way. But we are here. All of us are here to ask or to answer questions to the best of our abilities.
If I could, Dr. Hartz, I wonder if it'd be helpful. I have heard concerns from folks that the current vaccine is only authorized and not approved. Is there a distinction there that makes it that matters?
So yeah, it's only emergency use authorization. So it's not totally been FDA approved. it's gone through all the same rigorous process, but the EUA is just more of a rapid way to get it set up so you don't have to go through the typical FDA approval process, which can take 3 to 6 months, sometimes longer. Pfizer and Moderna should be going through that full FDA approval this summer. So the emergency use authorization basically just means that meets all the criteria for emergency use, which basically says that we're in the middle of a pandemic and need to find ways to help things sooner. Has to hit above a certain criteria for their 50% for efficacy, and so that it can allow to be used, and then it'll go through full approval over the next few weeks. And that's the other thing is with EUAs, it's not something that can be mandated. It has to be voluntarily given, and those are the main differences.
I had asked Provost Nairn about that as well, about whether, about students, about it being mandated. And he said, no, as long as it's only emergency use, it cannot be mandated. Nobody can be made to take it. So that's one of the big differences in the emergency use as well.
Great. Thank you all. It looks like we don't have any other questions. If our guest speakers wouldn't mind, would you please leave your emails in our chat, just so if people do think of questions, they can ask whoever they find to be the most efficient person to answer. I'll leave mine as well. But yeah, feel free to hold on to those if questions do arise later on. If you're confused about the process of making an appointment and want some help, we can help, or at least connect you to people that can. We are well connected to a lot of the diverse array of people who are working on this to make it as easy as it can be. So we're here to help as much as we can.